is Jack Gardner, and we are here at E3 2019 to recap the things that are going on in gaming that you may or may not have missed for good old Extra Life. And we've kind of held back to make sure that all, if not most, of the press conferences have gone by. The only thing we have left is Nintendo tomorrow, and we will include that with our recap of what we've seen on the show floor when we put out this next episode. For now, this will be the day zero podcast, because tomorrow's day one, really. So might not feel that way. Yeah. But yeah, we're just here to talk about what we've seen, what we think is interesting, and all of that. So with me is Marcus Stewart.
Hey.
And Naomi Lugo. And Zach Wojnar.
That's me.
Yeah, and they're going to help me talk about these games, because there was a lot of them over the last 2 days. So many games. So, with that, Marcus, what are your most anticipated games here?
There's the big three that, I guess now the big four, that all have release dates. And that's, Cyberpunk 2077, Final Fantasy VII Remake. There's that Death Stranding. That's a little bit before E3, but it was dropped roughly the same week, so we can lump it in there. And then there's the Avengers. Marvel's Avengers, I guess, is the official title now of that. Those are all coming out within 7-8 months of each other, which is kind of insane. 3 of them within months succession. And obviously pending somebody gets delayed, which I would bet Square, because they are the most guilty of that, most prone. So those are the big 3 or 4. There's the Outer Worlds. I had to stop myself from saying Wilds again. The Outer Worlds by Obsidian. I think that looks really cool. Doom Eternal is another one. And if you haven't noticed, I like a lot of games. I love games, it turns out. So it's a little bit of a scatterbrain, kind of scattershot answer here, because it's hard to pick just a few, because I think there's a lot of stuff, both big and small, that I think looks really cool and interesting, and I want to get my hands on, and I wish I had more time and maybe even more appendages to play them all at the same time. But overall, before we get into like the nitty-gritty specifics about like why we like everything, I'm just to say I'm excited in general for a lot of things that I saw in the last couple of days. Things are looking good.
Thank you. Yeah, it does. Things do look good. Like it appears to be a really, really good time for games coming up here. Like we have the Final Fantasy VII Remake, we have Death Stranding, we have all these really cool titles, and both big and small. Like I think some of the most interesting things I saw weren't necessarily like the showstoppers, but I definitely had my attention grabbed by Deathloop. That looked very different and interesting, even though we didn't see any gameplay, which is why I'm not like over the moon about it. Conceptually, it seems really interesting and cool. And I think one of the other big standouts for me is Summer Catchers, which is this side-scrolling road trip game about this little girl in a car made for her by a dog man who finds her in the winter, and she goes through this magical world that has like flying whales and stags made out of stars, and it's really pretty and cool, and it has a really Studio Ghibli vibe, and I love it. So thank you for that, indie games. Zach, what about you?
I guess like everybody else, I'm super excited for so many different games. But I'm going to talk briefly about 2 of them that we've seen at the press conferences so far. First, Bethesda showed off Wolfenstein Youngbloods, or Youngblood. Youngblood?
It's Youngblood.
It is Youngblood. I mean, I wrote the story last night. I should know this, but
It's like if your father was talking about Wolfenstein to you, he's like, Wolfenstein Youngblood?
Okay, so I'm a huge fan of the revived. It's not rebooted technically. Revived Wolfenstein series by Machine Games, and this one, The Hook, that we still really haven't seen, and the trailers have not really pushed hard on it, possibly because they want to sell it as well as a single-player experience, is that it's two-player co-op online, which is one of my favorite things, especially when it's limited to two. A lot of games when we've got 4 or 6 player online co-op and it's me with like one person, we're doomed. We're doomed. We're not gonna make it. But when it's 2 and it's built for 2, that sounds like the kind of ride I can get on. Looks fantastic. 1980s aesthetic. BJ Blazkowicz is an old man, and his twin daughters have to save him in Nazi-occupied Paris. Ooh, exciting. The other game that we saw today, or the next day, Ubisoft showed off Watch Dogs Legion. Ooh, Legion. It's not Watch Dogs 3, and the hook is that you can recruit pretty much anybody. There's no central, at least based on this trailer and what we know so far, there's no central lead character who, anchors the game. There's no Marcus from Watch Dogs 2 or Aiden from Watch Dogs 1. Not that he anchored that game much. Oh, shots fired, zing, zing. But anybody you can recruit from taxi driver doing his stuff to little old lady being awesome to the bald guy who gets killed. It's awesome. And we'll see if they can follow through on that idea of all of these characters being fully developed characters, hundreds and hundreds, thousands, who knows. But in terms of anticipation, not having to worry about, how is it actually all going to pan out? Who knows? But in terms of anticipation right now, it's way up there.
Yeah, and we got Helen. Good old Helen.
She's more than a meme.
I know, Marcus. You kind of went over the moon about Helen. Actually,
she really should be on the box art. I mean, they haven't revealed it yet, but she's very quickly become the star of the game. She is a former assassin that has won the hearts of millions.
True. And if you can't judge the worth of an assassin by the adoration of millions, what can you judge an assassin based on? But
you think Helen could beat John Wick?
Ooh, you can't just say yeah immediately.
Really think about it. Keanu Reeves might still be here. We could ask him.
He would accept his doom, I feel like he would be like, oh, you're awesome, you've lived, and you've earned this, and just let her kill.
I don't think he's above killing an old lady that's trying to kill him.
Now she killed his dog.
But yeah, I'm pretty excited for some. Speaking of John Wick, I'm pretty excited for Cyberpunk 2077. I don't think it's gonna deliver what I want from a Cyberpunk game, just from everything it's shown so far. What do I want from a Cyberpunk game? Well, like I want it to go more into like interesting ideas that are mature rather than curse words and violence, and like that stuff's great, but it's not what makes a story mature. And I don't know that we're necessarily gonna get it from what I've seen in the trailers and their gameplay presentations so far. But I really like Keanu Reeves, so it kind of evens out a little bit for me. I want there to be good dystopian ideas and exploration of those ideas, and I don't know, a lot of these big budget cyberpunk games often come down to like, mechanical augmentations bad, humans good kind of thing, and I don't know. I'm hoping that this can kind of get beyond that, because Deus Ex kind of fell into that, and I wish it hadn't. But Naomi, what are you interested in that you've seen over the last couple days?
Just Dance on Wii. That's pretty much all I need for the upcoming year. I mean, uh,
I bet the people that sold their Wii's are kicking themselves right now.
I mean, it is. I joke, but it is really interesting to see the different, the scope of the launch for Just Dance. I mean, that's a staying power if it's still on the Wii.
Logo up there.
But yeah, I am super stoked for Cyberpunk, which we got a release date on. I mean, I was not expecting that, and I was definitely not expecting Keanu Reeves just to pop his beautiful face into the trailer, and then be on stage. Like, come on, that is really cool. But like Jack said, I really want to see more of this game, and how it deals with the human element of things. Because right now it just seems like a really like macho power fantasy, instead of something more interesting that looks into what technology does to humanity. And it's just an opportunity lost. But you know, we still haven't seen the whole of the game, so maybe there is branching paths where you could just go down the violent, I don't even know what they are. They're not mercenaries, they're like guns for hire, so they're trying to make as much money as possible. Fine, maybe there's different paths where you can be humanitarian, or I don't know. I'm being altruistic and hoping for that. But what we've seen is pretty much all violence, right, and a little bit of augments. But yeah, there were some smaller releases that I've been pretty excited about. Minecraft Dungeons is just a concept that should have been here a while ago, but I didn't think of it, and I'm glad it's here. It for those of you who don't know, it's basically like an isometric view dungeon crawler with Minecraft characters and Minecraft graphics and multiplayer, which is coming out next year, I believe. And heck yeah, I mean, that's a lot of the reason why I play Minecraft sometimes, is to just be able to go on multiplayer and play with my friends, and being able to do that in a quest format is kind of a winning combo. I was really impressed by a couple of indie games from the Microsoft press conference. Spiritfarer was a really cute little game, or I don't mean to say little, but it's an indie game, where, at least from what we saw, you build up like a society on a little houseboat, and it wants you to build, care, explore, and learn how to say goodbye. So I know that there's going to be the feels in that. Yeah, and really excited to play all these games on my Switch. So, yeah. Oh, and we got to see Tifa finally in Final Fantasy VII. So now I just need to see Red 13, and I'll be happy. Although I'm guessing he'll be episode or disc 2 or whatever.
I will like to say, to go back to Cyberpunk for a bit, counterpoint to you guys' point about the premise of the game not seemingly, we don't know, not tackling more, I guess, human issues. I will say that I kind of like that, because every early season, seemingly most, if not, well, not all, but most Cyberpunk stories kind of tell the same story of the general, like, since Blade Runner, of like, what does it mean to be human thing in regards to like AI and augments. Like, literally most Cyberpunk stories are already that. So honestly, I would like someone to get away from that and just tell a different kind of story in that kind of world. Because like literally that's like you know, Blade Runners, like Observer, another Cyberpunk game, Deus Ex, other like Altered Carbon. Like there's like, I kind of like that, at least so far. It kind of looks like I don't say GTA, because I don't think it's that, but like it just feels like, okay, this is just a kind of crime. I don't know if it's a crime story. It's hard to say what it actually is, but it doesn't seem like that will be the focus. I'm sure they'll get into it, but I don't think they'll like. And again, maybe they don't want to lean as hard into that just because that's been done to death to me at this point. Of like, I don't want to see him with the character debating like, if I get this augmented arm, am I less of a person? Or you know, like, or like, I fell in love with this robot lady. What does this mean? You know, like I just like, okay, like I've seen that. I don't just do anything else in this universe, please. Or this, not even universe, but just this genre, this subgenre, basically. You know what I mean? So.
I mean, I like personally, I'm not interested. I'm like you. I'm in the same boat. I'm not interested in those tired tropes of what dystopian games are about. But I am interested in, okay, well, we know those tropes, so let's go beyond them. Let's I've been saying, and I've been hearing a lot from other people, but like, you know, trans people exist, and trans people exist in cyberpunk, or should exist in cyberpunk dystopias. Like that would be an interesting narrative to me, because like the trans experience is essentially changing your body. So, well, how does that affected by living in a future where like literally anyone can change their body for any reason? With like, how does that affect gender? How does that affect like the way we think about relationships with other people? Like that, those are things that I'm interested in seeing a cyberpunk game explore, because frankly, in a lot of stuff, all we see is like, oh yeah, this guy has a robot arm. It's the same as a normal arm, and otherwise no one thinks it's weird. And it's like, well, okay, but what if we're not talking about just a robot arm? What if we're talking about like their entire bottom half of their body was replaced by like 8 weird spider legs, like
Dr. Loveless in Wild Wild West.
Yeah, like you. It can get so much weirder. It can get so much more interesting, and I think that's where we get into those weirder questions. It's not like the Deus Ex Mankind Divided, like, oh, I have this robot arm because I got my arm blown off while shooting people, and now I have to live in this weird ghetto for robot people. Like that's not interesting to me. But I mean, like that was essentially what the game was about. So I'm more interested in the questions that come after that. Like, okay, like what comes after? Well, what comes after that existential crisis of like, oh, I fell in love with a robot? Like, what are the problems associated with that are down the line? That's what I'm interested in.
Kind of building off of that, Jack, I think that looking at the pedigree of CD Projekt Red with The Witcher 3, they built this whole world in that game that is a medieval Eastern Europe fantasy playground. And I think that they're applying that same thinking to Cyberpunk. You know, I definitely think that they are playing their cards close to their chest with what they're going to show. I think that they are leading with with their marketing muscle, and I think it's much easier to sell a male-oriented power fantasy. But I think that they can sell that and include whatever they're going to include, and I cannot imagine a cyberpunk setting worth its salt that doesn't include those issues that you were talking about. And I think that I'm willing to give them, as we said before, the benefit of the doubt. I think that what we saw in that first trailer, that I'm a big dreamer trailer, was that showed off a lot of the world and showed off a lot of different avenues of storytelling that were snapshots, but I think in the game will be entire quest chains. But again, a lot of what all of us are saying about Cyberpunk is a lot of speculation, and I think that this setting of Night City in this game is benefiting from having that speculation of what's going to be in there, and I hope that everything that everyone wants is going to be in there, and like The Witcher, it's going to be a world that's so big that you can follow whatever quest lines you want and whatever characters you choose. And this kind of open world game will fulfill the open world promise of being whatever anyone wants to them, because it's all there. Something that they said at some point in some interview was that they wanted to focus on the punk in Cyberpunk. That a lot of it focuses on, like Jack, what you were saying before about the cyber, about that, cybernetics altering transhumanism, etc. And I think that the punk is telling like an intimate story about one person carving their way through this dystopia that they can't change, but they can play off in ways that that they can play off in ways that benefit them specifically. And again, so much hype. Just can't wait. Cyberpunk.
Oh, okay. Keanu. One game I want to talk about, a new game, talk about some new IPs, is that Ghostwire, a Tango Gameworks game. That was pretty cool looking, right? You know, Sans cute presenter that has also taken the internet by storm. That creative director. That was that looked cool. I'm a fan of those Evil Within games, especially the second one. So it's kind of cool. You know, we thought it would be a third one of those, but they're doing something completely different. It doesn't even necessarily look like horror. Maybe more suspense than like, at least not like the kind of horror they've been doing, like straight up horror. What do you guys think of that? I thought that looked pretty cool, like just conceptually.
Yeah, I thought that looked really, really interesting and neat. It's it looked like the Rapture by way of Shinji Mikami. Like just everyone disappearing.
Shinji Mikami got the Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah, like it looked like the clothes. It was hunting. Like the clothes are just kind of floating to the ground, and I mean, it looks like, again, much like Cyberpunk, a lot of speculation. But there's, there was a lot of imagery related to like ninjas and like ghosts and
like
samurai.
Yeah, like I'm assuming the player character, like Ronin from in-game.
Yeah.
Fire powers too, shooting out of his hands.
Yeah, so I'm hesitant to like even try and speculate about what kind of a game it is, aside from like obviously it's gonna be horror, but maybe we're looking at something that's much more fluid. Maybe
like
it,
actiony.
Yeah, maybe I guess as I'm thinking about it, the impression I get, like, okay, so you have this huge open world from this Rapture, that's clearly a large-scale event, and you have ninjas. Well, to me that says you're going to be running around in a large world and doing something, and whether that's combat or, like, stealth, that could be really interesting, trying to sneak around ghosts. I don't know. But I'm intrigued.
And that reminded me of the running around ninja stuff, Star Wars. When I first look at that, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Still a weird name to me. But the first gameplay reveal of that, and that looked pretty much what I expected that to be, but that doesn't mean it looked bad. I was like, yeah, this looks like a third-person Star Wars game, but it looks cool. Like, it's funny, like, you got the wall running, which is a, Titanfall thing, which is like, hey, you know how to wall run, so put it in there. And, we saw Cal Kestis, the protagonist, making his way across some cool-looking environments. They make sure to let you know it's Star Wars by having a TIE fighter fly by every 2 seconds. But yeah, he's doing I'm deflecting the shots, I'm cutting things out with the lightsaber, but I noticed it was also, like, a lot heavier on the stealth stuff, which is cool, because that was kind of promised, because the idea of the game is that you're trying to flee and hide, not so much a typical Star Wars story of like, hey, we're gonna join a resistance force and take it to the Empire. It's like, hey, I'm trying to like escape and not die. I'm not even technically a Jedi yet, so though I can do some crazy advanced Jedi things. But that game looks really cool, especially like since Respawn really hasn't ever done a third person game, and this is their first time working with a license as well. But so far I was like, yeah, I want to play that. That looks cool.
So I actually missed that reveal. I mean, everything everyone has described to me secondhand makes it sound like basically the Force Unleashed. And I don't know. It's interesting to me that so many people are so excited about it because both the Force Unleashed games just got like critically kind of torn apart. Um, I mean, yeah, people like that first game. All right. I think maybe part of the downside of it was that people weren't thrilled about the story, or the way the story was integrated was kind of clunky. But I'm glad that people are excited about it. I liked those games.
And I think it's more like been so starved for like a single player Star Wars story. Like we've had very few like big Star Wars games in general, and the ones we have gotten have been multiplayer focused, and even those weren't super great, like the Battlefront games. So like that, like Force Unleashed was the last time we got one of those, because 1313, and then whatever Amy Hemming and Visceral's game, like the ragtag thing, got scrapped. So it's like we're all like beyond ready for like one of these kind of games. Yeah. And it looks really I mean, it's from a studio with a great pedigree. So it's like that excitement of like, I just want to play a Star Wars story, just a regular, like, I want to just be a character and just play a single player Star Wars game. Yes, it's got some Force Unleashed DNA, which is fine to me. But it looks like at least the writing and like the world building seems to be a little bit more, it's funny because they're both set in kind of the same era of like filling the between episodes 3 and 4. Though this is like right after episode 3, as opposed to like Force Unleashed was like kind of shortly before 4, or like in the middle somewhere. But it's even the eras are similar, which is funny.
Yeah, there are a whole lot of similarities between these, but I'm hopeful that if this succeeds, that we'll actually see EA finally applying more of the Star Wars license beyond just like, pushing it out to the Lego company, Traveler Tales. We're also making a Star Wars game. Yeah, all the Star Wars.
Everything you could ever want in the Star Wars, except for Solo. There's no Solo.
Does anyone else have anything they want to talk about? Naomi!
Just speaking of Lego, we got pretty cool look at Forza Horizon 4 DLC expansion pack something. Yeah. Where the cars are made out of Lego, the characters are made out of Lego, the worlds are made out of Lego, and it seems kind of cheesy if you just say it, but the trailer looked freaking awesome. Like, just a lot of fun. And as someone who played like the old Nintendo 64, like Lego Racers games, I'm stoked for that.
Yeah,
like
cool.
Yeah, like you apply the visual feel or the visuals of Lego and then the feel of them and add that with like real race car physics. Like I'm sold. Like, I don't even have a copy of Forza, but that kind of got me. I was like, all right, I can get back into this because I solidly enjoy racing games, and if they make it kind of campy like that just makes it even better for me. So
I feel like we'd be remiss to not talk about the Project Scarlet stuff.
Oh yeah,
that's kind of a big thing. Anyone else kind of underwhelmed by that announcement a bit?
Yeah, I don't know. I was expecting a whole lot more. Like, I was literally expecting them to show off the box this year. I thought they were gonna try and get the jump on Sony, because like I think only a few places have seen the prototype PS5 in action, but like it's out there. It's just not quite in its finalized production box yet. And I was expecting that Microsoft was going to be trying to get a little bit ahead of the game, and I'm disappointed that we didn't see it.
And I guess in a way because it's coming fall of next year. Like they technically have one more E3 before it comes out. So I guess next year would be the E3 that we get the full like here's the box thing, assuming they don't hold another event before then. So I guess that's something to keep in mind. I guess in a way because they teased it last year, it made you think like this year will be the full reveal, which in hindsight is like why even tease it last year? Maybe this should have been the tease, and then next year we get the thing. But yeah, like we didn't even get the name. They just kind of confirmed the already leaked code name that was already an open secret pretty much. But the only big thing outside of them saying like this is going to be the most powerful thing ever, like it was just the thing that they did with the X of like we'll get a bunch of developers to sit down in front of a camera and be like, you guys are not going to believe this is going to be the strongest thing, like games we couldn't make before, we can make them with this thing pretty much. And other than that, it's like, hey, Halo Infinite, that's coming, that's launching with this console, which is cool to see a Halo game launch with an Xbox console again. It hasn't happened since the original Xbox. So that'll be a system seller probably. But yeah,
I don't know. I was both. I was disappointed on the tech end of things for Xbox, but I feel like they did a lot to bring actually interesting games this year. A lot of games that I wasn't expecting that caught me by surprise that were really pleasant to see, like Age of Empires 2 on console. That's crazy. And I am loving what they're doing with their Game Pass program. Expanding it to PC is a really smart move. Especially with the partnership that they announced prior to E3 with Valve to bring their games to Steam. I think that a lot of this is like some really good and savvy moves on their part. And if we're just talking about tech and stuff that we've seen, I know it's pronounced Stadia, but I'm gonna call it Stadia. Stadia it's more impressive to me than what tech wise I saw from Xbox, and I think that it's almost here is the thing. Yeah. Yeah, their launch plans are not great. But they're gonna be it's gonna be rolling out. It's in the works, and it seems like it actually works on decent internet, which is the ever present caveat to all of the Stadia business. Well, like the problem with Stadia isn't necessarily like the tiers that you're gonna get. It's the way that your ISP is going to treat that sudden spike in data use. Like data caps are just arbitrary. But the thing is, ISPs don't care that they're arbitrary, and so if they enforce those data caps, you're going to be hitting them pretty quickly with Stadia streaming, which is kind of a down thing. I don't know. Zach, do you have any thoughts?
Google Stadia is something that I don't like. I feel like for me personally, it's not something that I'm interested in much, but I'm definitely gonna keep my ear to the ground to see how it plays out. I could definitely see it being an alternative to like bringing a handheld device, depending on how ubiquitous Wi-Fi becomes. It's so odd to say that. It's Wi-Fi is treated like some kind of brand new technology that is on the cutting edge when it should be ubiquitous by now. But as for the Xbox, I feel like their approach right now is like tricking us into talking about it when there's so little it to be talked about. They showed a Halo demo which looked fine, and it looked like Halo, but at 60 FPS, which is a big deal. But all of those numbers and jargon make so little sense to 90% of people, and they don't matter until we see the games, and they don't want to show off the games until they've got a release window, because they've still got to sell the games that are coming out now, and they should, because there are games on PS4, on Xbox One, and on current generation hardware that people are going to be playing for many years, just like many people are still playing games from last generation hardware. And they try to trick us into calling them retro games because they don't profit as much from them, and that's why they want us to buy all the new stuff. But every hardware generation, you hear so many stories about people getting rid of all their old stuff so they can get new stuff, and then inevitably having that regret of, oh, I miss my old stuff. And yeah, well, if you can, and not everybody can, but hold on to your stuff. Old stuff is cool.
Are you promoting hoarding?
Yes.
Okay. Speaking of Halo, I was actually even kind of let down by that reveal, because it was just the pre-rendered cinematic thing, but I really wanted to either see gameplay or to kind of have the yeah, but there was no gameplay. It was just the cutscene thing, and also or at least have the 343 go up there and say what this was, because the thing with Halo that they've been promising is that this is going to be a dramatic shift in what Halo is in terms of design. So I was really looking forward to see what that was, because it sounds like it's not just going to be another Halo game. Oh no, we're changing Halo on a fundamental level, at least based on everything they said. So I was kind of let down that we didn't really get to see or find out what that meant at all. We just kind of saw Master Chief wake up, which we've seen Master Chief wake up from things a lot at this point. He sleeps more than Sora in Kingdom Hearts, honestly, at this point. So I was like, oh, okay, all right. He puts his helmet on, he talks to the dude, and he walks into the light, and that's about it. So I was kind of bummed out. I was like, oh man, I was really hoping to learn what this was. What is Halo Infinite? Still don't know that. So I guess tune in next year.
Yeah, and as much as I loved a lot of the things that I saw from and this isn't just Microsoft, but a lot of the developers on the floor, if it wasn't an indie game, a lot of these AAA developers are just gearing up to release on the next gen consoles. So a lot of what we're seeing this year, and some of what we saw even last year, is all just leading up to a release that can go on both the current gen and the new gen. Kind of like what happened with The Last of Us, if you guys remember that. Yeah.
That's kind of where we're at now. A lot of these games are kind of the swan song for this gen.
Yeah. So it's tough because a lot of these companies are treading water and showing us the really cool stuff that they're working on, but isn't going to be ready for a while. And
that Gods and Monsters game that Ubisoft teased at the end of their thing, that could be an interesting thing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things that we've been seeing teased, and if you were watching the press conferences and you saw something that was well, that was really, really cool, but I don't know actually what that is. What's the actual gameplay like? What kind of game is it? What's the deal? Those are games that we're not going to see for a while, and we're not going to have answers to that. And there were just a lot of those. One that comes to mind definitely is Deathloop, which was during the Bethesda conference. It's coming from Arcane Studios, the people who did Dishonored, and it looks really, really interesting. It looks really cool. You get the basic idea of the concept from the trailer, but we don't actually know what that looks like in practical terms for a game, and that's kind of that's kind of the stuff that I want, and it's stuff that gets satisfied relatively quickly by like, for example, looking at the Kind of Funny game showcase where you saw 60 games in under an hour, and like all of you pretty much understood what all of them were going for in just like the few seconds they had of screen time, because you saw the actual gameplay and knew what was going on. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting time. Um, Yep, knee deep in transition time.
I think that the fact that it's a transition time, I think, is also why so many of these games, and perhaps we'll see how many of them stick to them, but I think it may be the lasting legacy of this E3 season, is that all of these games, the biggest ones, have release dates. Even the ones that aren't here, your Death Stranding, your Modern Warfare. Although, of course, that's going to come out this year. There was never any doubt that they would miss their yearly window. But Cyberpunk, Final Fantasy VII, and the Avengers all have release dates. And I feel like maybe check the tapes, but we don't get that many hard locks as we usually do. And I think it's because they know that they have to get it out by this time, because if they don't get it out early enough, then they can't get players to double dip when the next gen version comes out. If the game comes out when the next gen version comes out at the same time, everyone's going to flock to the next gen version. Or they'll, get the current gen version, and then by the time they upgrade, they'll be playing newer games. But something like Death Stranding coming out before the end of this year, if the next gen consoles come out holiday next year, then we'll double dip. Oh, it's Last of Us Remastered. It's GTA 5 on PS4. It's good marketing, but it's a nice case where what lines up for the publishers lines up for the consumers.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like it's like I said, it's an interesting time for games. It's a time of change, and I think a time of change is always interesting for people who really love games, because that means we get a lot of stuff that has been really refined, and we also get a lot of new stuff that's really experimental and kind of edgy. But with that, I think we will have some final thoughts on what we've seen so far, and we'll start with Naomi.
I'm gonna kind of detour a little bit and talk about the last press conference, and that's Nintendo, because we have a nice lead-in. Switch is still going strong. I feel like we're getting a lot of games that are coming to Switch, and a lot of remasters, a lot of new games, a lot of indie games, a lot of old classics. And I'm obviously really excited to see some more Pokemon news tomorrow. But also just more coming to the Switch. Our new Super Smash characters. I know the internet has been waiting with bated breath for those, so that'll be a really interesting reveal. Hopefully we'll see some Animal Crossing news, anything, something. Since that game is coming out this year, I can't imagine that they can completely, ditch it. And we've already seen a lot from Pokemon, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see maybe the evolutions for them, or, and more expanse on the story. We've already gotten really solid details on like game mechanics and characters, and like it wasn't very generous, but we got 3 8th gen Pokemon. So maybe we're going to see some more, but I feel like Nintendo is going to more focus on the great breadth of games that they have, because they're still a very viable console, and it's going to be really successful for a while, and they're probably seeing this transition year as an opportunity to push more Switches and be like, hey, while you're waiting for the next gen, you can still play a lot of really cool games that you liked on the consoles on your Switch. So I really see Nintendo going strong. I mean, Nintendo's always going to go strong, but transition years are kind of their jam, since they're not in the traditional console race.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, Nintendo's pretty much exempt from everything that's happening because of how they kind of broke away from the cycle that everyone else is on. Like, where everyone is transitioning, they're kind of coming into hitting their stride right now. Like, they're very much in their own little pocket dimension where none of what's happening matters that much to them. Yeah, like, honestly, I 100% think that tomorrow's thing will be mostly Animal Crossing because they got Mario Maker out of the way with that giant direct recently. They got Pokemon out of the way with their giant direct. There's really no need to spend much time on those games with this. So I think honestly the bulk of tomorrow will be Animal Crossing as well as the Link's Awakening remaster. I think those two will get most of the time. And then, Luigi's Mansion 3, Fire Emblem, like I said, they have a huge year right now with 29 because all of this stuff is supposed to be this year. Astral Chain, Demon X Machina. It's hard not to say Damon because it's the A in the front. Hopefully Bayonetta 3. I guess Mario Sonic is happening based on the E3 badges promoting it. That's a thing that's coming back. So cool for people that like those games. Like I said, they can down and just do what they want. I'm just curious if we see a Switch hardware revision, even though they already got out and said, like, nah, we're not doing that. I don't totally believe that. So, like, it's kind of like, I'll believe it when I see it. So I half expect that to happen tomorrow. If not, cool, I don't care. But I wouldn't be surprised if they were like, just kidding, here's a new Switch of some sort. But, like, in terms of, like, final thoughts, like I said, like, this generation, it feels weird because, like, this generation, even more so than any other, it feels like it just blew by. Like, until you really look back and, like, yeah, it's been 6 years. Still not as long as the last generation. Like, the last generation was so long, like, the longest ever, that this would normally, back in the day, this would be when we start ramping up for new stuff. But now it's, like, we're going in, like, weird directions. We're, like, with going all streaming for some stuff like Stadia, and then Microsoft with Project xCloud, not all streaming, but leading into it. And then we still don't know what Sony's plans are for that. It seems like, I would imagine, kind of being maybe the most traditional of the three, but still delving into it a bit. But, yeah, like with games, a lot of those big games getting hard release dates kind of solidifies, like, hey, this is probably the last full year of this generation before we start seeing new stuff next year. So here's our last batch of big stuff, and then see you next gen for the most part, and kind of putting a bow on this generation that is really kind of ultimately come and gone to a degree. It's kind of crazy when you look back on it, but yeah.
Just real quick, I think it's interesting just based on what both you and Naomi said. Like, the Switch has really positioned itself in that bubble where it's really the only handheld really outside of phones and tablets, and it has the power to run newer games, which makes it really attractive to third parties, and it's the only really decent option outside of like do-it-yourself ROM solutions to legitimately playing games on the go, and that could very well change with Stadia, but for now, the realistic option for most people is pretty much only the Switch, and that, and to your point, Marcus, like, there's this. It does feel like the generation blew by fast, but it also doesn't feel like the generation is over yet, because it's more like the generation was going, and then a giant hand came down and just like smeared the clear-cut border. Like, usually, like, all three consoles launch at the same time, But then you look back on this generation, and like the Wii U had a weird lifespan, and yeah, technically the Wii U is first, and now we have this Switch, and the Switch seems like it's here to stay for a good long while. But we have this other console generation kind of coming to a close, but it was also buffered by new machines like midway through that were many people are still very happy with. Like it's not like the HD gaming revolution where there was that giant advancement and like everyone was just kind of like, wow, this is huge. So, and that's just interesting.
I feel like I'm gonna push back just a little tiny bit because I think it's just too early to begin eulogizing the PS4, Xbox One era yet. This Project Scarlet announcement said holiday 2020. It's a year and a half away, and I think that there's a ton of games. The farthest out that we saw was Avengers, which I believe is May 2020. And that's still, there's going to be a lot of games that we haven't heard about yet that are going to be coming to PS4 and Xbox One that just weren't ready in time for E3. And, stuff gets delayed and stuff's going to come out after the new consoles. And based on what we've heard about PS5 and backwards compatibility, there will be games that were designed for PS4 that, publishers are going to go, we don't really have the resources to make a PS5 version, but we'll unlock the frame rate or have a variable resolution, and they're going to be noticeably upticked on PS5. I think they always want a good cross-generation transition for players. We saw that a lot in the PS2 to PS3 era when they were making PS2 versions of PS3 games that were often completely different games and usually came out on Wii as well because Nintendo runs its own race and they had this last-gen power on their next-gen system, which worked incredibly well for the Wii. And they're trying it again with Switch, which we talked about being powerful enough to run current games. Once the PS5 and Xbox Scarlet come out, I cannot imagine that a system that struggles but still manages to successfully run something like Mortal Kombat 11. I can't see that running, the next stuff. That will effectively be 2 generations ahead. But that's a whole other thing that we'll get to when we get to. For a final thought, I do want to throw a little bit of shade at the Halo demo for Xbox Scarlet when they had that cheesy, corny, dorky bit where the hologram shows up and it's the woman and the little baby talking in the hologram. That's just so cynically in my mind reads as, look, we're next gen. We make you feel. It's not just explosions, it's the little baby doing voice acting that is kind of like a pre-rendered thing within at least has the look of a pre-rendered thing within a in-engine footage that, every console generation they do that. The PS2's famous emotion engine and the cell processor and, it's HD motion capture, all that. I really zoned out during that hologram bit. I was like, oh, they're doing it again. They're doing what they always do. We're going to make you feel without actually making us feel. But, still very excited for everything that's coming up. But I could not let this podcast end without throwing a little bit of shade at that.
All right. Well, there you have it. Those are kind of our thoughts about what we've seen and where our brains went after we saw all of these different games being presented. It can get really overwhelming. And so I hope that you share your thoughts with us our social media, and I hope you leave comments, and we can all share that experience together, because it's really a collective thing, this E3. So yeah, we'd love to know what you thought about everything, because I know that like I definitely had criticism for the hardware part, but I didn't cynically read the Halo trailer. I thought it was pretty cool, but I, like Marcus, I'm a little upset that we didn't see gameplay, but like, we will see gameplay probably E3 at next year, because that's when they're going to be gearing up for the Scarlet launch. But all that being said, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our recap, Day 0. And we will be back tomorrow to talk a little bit more about what we saw on the show floor. Some things that are probably a little bit more immediate, rather than long-term, like, games that aren't coming out for like 4 years. So yeah, tune in for that. And again, if you haven't, you should sign up for Extra Life. You can head over to www.extra-life.org. If you don't know what that is, it is a fantastic charity for sick and injured kids all across the United States and Canada. So please go check that out. And with that, have a good night, everybody. Eat your peas and carrots, and we'll see you on the flippity dippity.